All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Coffee Break Show on this lovely Friday. Here we are on a wrap up Friday, as Vicky likes to call it, in the Success Secrets for Business, Family, and Life group here on Facebook. Let's kind of get this done. We were having some a little tech issues as we tried to bounce between my account and Vicky's account. And just so you know, Stella is asleep, enjoying no, I guess she's not in the sunshine, but if there's a little barking going on, it's going to be her or the other little one in the room with us today. A lot going on in the world. Probably the biggest headline that we talked about in our little group is China. We have seen both administrations, the Obama administration and this administration, kind of throw some ships on through that Taiwanese Strait, and then kind of circling Hong Kong. And the Navy was denied embarking in Hong Kong last year, just kind of because of the tensions that's happening between the two countries. Hey, I see you coming on in there. Happy Friday. My coffee's back there. I don't do well when I'm talking with coffee. In fact, I'm much better with water, and I was recalcitrant and not grabbing that to deal with this next half hour. But I think China is going to be something that we will absolutely be dealing with, even if we end up with tariffs. And there was tariffs for the foreseeable future. I don't see that being undone anytime soon. They have had too much access to our manufacturing base, our intellectual property, to willingly surrender that back to us. They're going to want to hold on. And indeed, they made a play saying that they were going to invest the better part of $1 trillion in the next little while to ensure that they would meet us technologically. All right, Vic. Maybe that's a little better, huh? All right. Yay. All right. Good to see you all there as we slowly begin to trickle in on a Friday. It would be nice if it were Saturday. You could sleep in just a little bit more, but if you're east of the mountains, then you've already slept in. So back to China. We're going to gradually and probably very decidedly and assertively bring back manufacturing, with the economy down 30%, 40% over probably what will be the sum total of this year. I don't think the reopening is going to go as well as we'd like, but as we reopen the economy, we're simply not going to have the need for the quantity of consumerism we once had. We're just not going to need it. There's not going to be a market for that. So it'll be a lot easier for these corporations to then come back and bring those goods back into the States and then export from there. The other things, especially pharmaceuticals, that has got to happen. We've got to be able to have control of our own medicine supply chain. That really, it's amazing to me that we let go of that. And I can tell you that much of that manufacturing capacity was focused in Puerto Rico, where they had tax breaks that these corporations, that these pharmaceutical companies took advantage of. So they would move their manufacturing to Puerto Rico, manufacture their product without having to pay federal taxes upon that product, and then they could ship it globally. But there had to be some lobbying via the Chinese in the mid 2004, 2005, 2006 range, to where the congressmen, most of them Republicans in this particular case, clawed back that tax gift to the Puerto Ricans and the companies that were based there. And it was at that point in time that that capital looked for a cheaper place, probably a place also without strict environmental controls on their waste product coming out of those factories. So Puerto Rico saw a mass exodus of that pharmaceutical manufacturing that would have stayed in the States, even if it's within a territory. And that went overseas. And now we're going to have to figure that out, because after having spent a year and a half in Puerto Rico, you could literally drive from end to end of the island and come across Pfizer, come across Baxter, come across all of these other companies that had built big plants that now are only partially used or have been idle for a big period of time. And those workers were not invited to go to China. They were not invited to go to these other lower cost for unit labor locations. They were simply laid off, given a severance package and patted on the back as they left the door. So that was kind of a struggle, but that is something that needs to be a presidential priority and in my opinion, that's where we've been for the last couple of years, because it's become apparent that this is a problem, and it's unfortunate that it took a virus to affect that kind of change. The other thing that I think is going to be a threat with China, and we have made commitments to other nations to defend them from the dragon. And that could be an obligation that we're choose to honor or renege from in likely the near future, as they have built out of the Spratly Islands and farther south, really approaching upon the Indian, not the Indian Ocean, but Indonesia and their exclusive economic zone. Same with the Philippines, same with Vietnam. It's the China's 9-dash line. If you Google 9-dash line, it'll give you a very clear graphic of that South China Sea and the upwards of $2 trillion worth of commerce that passes through that area. And I can easily see how China will make a play in one way or another to begin to own the ports, the sea access along that sea. Is they're just saying, hey, this is ours. And it's not that much different from what America did in the Spanish-American War in 1898, as we did it with the Philippines and as we did with the Caribbean, with Cuba, with Puerto Rico. And that was kind of an agenda that was absolutely put out by the War Department in the late 1800s, is how do we secure our supremacy across these seas from these empires which were falling, those being Portugal, Spain, and England. And we have seen that typically these countries that have those empires also own the reserve currency. So there's an association there. So, Robin, it will be interesting to see how manufacturing comes back to the United States. Japan has made it a point to begin to offer tax incentives for their companies to move back home. And I think it's inevitable, as long as we've got free money and an open checkbook, that will happen stateside as well, that we will offer those breaks. And it's sad because the companies they gained economic benefit to go over there, and they booked those profits. They bought their stock. They rewarded their shareholders with those profits from those moves to cheaper manufacturing. And so it's unfortunate, I think, that we should have to pony up their capital to move back home. But that's just kind of where we seem to be at this point in the future. And then, yeah, will China make a move on Hong Kong? That's going to be in the news. It has been in the news for the last week or so with this new it's a rubber stamp parliament going on in China, basically saying that their national security laws simply apply to Hong Kong. And there will be massive protests, as we'll see tomorrow and Sunday in the weekend. And the question is, do they then tame down? Do they go away as we move into Monday? But China's not the kind of entity to just kind of let that go. All right, guys, that's probably a little bit of China, and it's going to probably consume a bunch of the news in this coming year as these two superpowers begin to posture and potentially even duke it out one way or another for how this goes. It was a big push for the president initially, and he got his tariffs, and then it's like the universe said, "Hey, here's this virus. Now deal with this." Because when nations, it really doesn't matter who they are, when they begin to falter in the eyes of their population, they need a rallying call. And we had ours with 9/11, where Bush's popularity went from the 40s to the mid 90% range, literally within the week, and probably inside of a day or two or three. It happened very, very quickly. And that's kind of a risk that we face, because if China does pull off something like that, like we previously mentioned, do we respond? Do we respond with force? And because we are 6,000 miles away, give or take, from that point of battle, it would be like Vietnam, where that's just a very long supply chain where we would have to ship hardware over. And that's going to be a really tough challenge. Happy Friday, Ryan. Good to see you there. Came across this other video, not to shift gears too much, and it was really kind of impressive. And this came from Australia. Come on, Scott. The crazy things. Yeah, right here. I wanted to make this full screen, and I want to share it. So the question is, what is this that was flying over the skies of Australia? I believe it was last night or the night before. This massive streaking in the sky. Doesn't look like a fireball. Certainly not one that you can't see things breaking off of it. And we've got some good video. This is just the first one I came across because it was kind of getting late in the morning and close to showtime. But it does look like it's fading there. But if it is a fairly good-sized reentry of a rock, I mean, that's bloody impressive. And I would kind of get all kinds of goosebumps and excited if I were to see that raging in the skies overhead. We're a good distance from, well, we had a meteor shower scheduled for the last part or for the first part of May, and I'm not familiar that we have anything in the immediate future, but this certainly would have been an outlying event over the skies of Australia. So that was kind of cool to see. I don't know if you guys have seen anything like that. I've seen, lots of shooting stars, some once, sometimes associated with, the Northern Lights that happened one day way back in August of 2003, or actually it was just 2000. It was kind of a really, really cool sight. Something else along that line. Where were we? I want to talk about Joe Rogan and how he had Alex Jones announce that he was leaving YouTube. He was simply leaving YouTube. He had wanted to make some videos, some discussions. He has 3-hour discussions with his guests, and who literally sits down for 3 hours and watches a podcast. Well, he'll have 17 plus million viewers on a single podcast if it's of current relevance and importance. And so he pinged YouTube and said, we're going to have these alternative view doctors on the show. And I want to know if we're going to get yanked if I do that. And YouTube's told him, yeah, we won't allow these doctors to talk about non-WHO approved topics. So Joe Rogan said, okay. So what he did is he signed a deal with Spotify for $100 million. And so one of the headlines I saw today was boom, Joe Rogan blows up the Death Star. And I would say maybe not blows it up, but at least puts a big visible fracture in the monolithic structure of Silicon Valley and Silicon Valley's ability to control the narrative. And that's why I'm on, and why Vicky's on, and why Tracy's on, and why we've kind of come together is so that at least in the beginning, we can get our narrative out there, our kind of view on these events. I think Joe Rogan is going to be absolutely instrumental in showing the rest of us how to not be demonetized or to be shadow banned by Twitter or YouTube. And YouTube's gotten to the point where you can directly type in the name of a video, and if it's not from an approved source, a fact-checked source, that video will not be your top result. It might not even be the second or third result. You might have to go to the second page of results to find the video that you specifically typed in the name of, because their algorithms have been designed, sculpted, so that that kind of information that they have deemed is dangerous to you, so that you don't have access to it. And that's why it's a blessing and a curse to have these social media platforms. They have allowed for an incredible infrastructure to be built around video sharing, about message boards. In the beginning, I remember there's AOL in the very beginning when we had to do the dial-up and you couldn't get rid of all those AOL discs that would show up in the mail. But there was an IRC, or Internet Relay Chat. I remember working with that kind of in the beginning. And then after 9/11, lots of websites were the way to go. And they felt like they were truly, truly free. And they had bulletin boards in there as well. So you could have talks, you could have a discussion with like-minded people that happened to find that site. And the trolling that occurred just wasn't as intense. You had to have people that had, let's just say, a higher quotient of openness before they would even go looking for a site. Like the one I used to follow was either Urban Survival or whatreallyhappened.com. And if you weren't interested in those topics, you simply didn't stumble across those sites. Now with the social media and friends and if you've got 500 friends, 1,000 friends, whether they're close friends or just acquaintances or even just social buddies, their stream will show up on yours. And so their opinions that may be different from yours then show up on your feed. And you're like, I don't believe that. And so we can begin to troll very quickly, very easily on something, on a topic that we don't really agree with. And whether that's good or bad, it's really neither here nor there. But we should have that right, or that ability to exchange a free exchange of ideas. The other side of this is that these are private platforms. Facebook is private. YouTube is private. Do they have the right as private entities using the public wires? And it's the wires. We're using the internet infrastructure, which also is private. So there's really been a privatization of what could have been and was in the very, very beginning a public asset. So the other side of this is that we may end up privatizing these behemoths for national safety, national security. I can honestly see that happening, because when you have such a push for censorship, and from a side that I didn't necessarily expect that to ever happen with, I was stunned, truly stunned, to see so many what I thought were stand-up people asking for the banning of expression of ideas, the banning of thoughts, the banning of certain points of view. And then to have a whole cheerleading crew behind it just blew me away. I'm like, okay, this is it's for me, it was like all of a sudden I was on one side of the spectrum and just slowly, not even slowly, rapidly drifted to another kind of point of view. And it is important, Robin, to see these other viewpoints, because if we can't step back and see what the other side is talking about, even if it annoys you, there has to be some reason why they have adopted that point of view. They see some value in it in one way or another. And because you don't see it doesn't mean that they don't have the right to speak out about it. So that's kind of Joe Rogan. So he's going to he had Alex Jones, of all people, and they're kind of buddies. And I've been on Alex Jones's show a couple of times over the years. In my whistleblowing experience, it was kind of he's a tough interviewer. Not so much in asking the hard questions, although that does happen. It's just that there's lots of interruptions, and so it's tough to develop thoughts, concepts with 30-second windows to get a word in edgewise, and that really becomes a challenge to try to develop thoughts and content. And this is another example that I wanted to pop up real quickly. Information found in your post. Independent fact checkers at Science Feedback say that information in your post is false. To stop the spread of false news, we've added a notice to your post. You can take a look at additional reporting from independent fact checkers who investigate reports of false information across Facebook. Incorrect. Low solar activity has little effect on Earth's climate. All fact checkers who partner with Facebook must be signatories of the International Fact Checking and Network and follow their code of principles. It's kind of fascinating that what can be an indisputable fact one day, 1 week, 1 year can be nothing but a myth in the future, or oh my goodness, we actually believed that. We had a tough time convincing ourselves that doctors actually believed that smoking was good for you. And then those outliers had a tough time convincing doctors that bacteria and germs actually existed, and then they needed to clean their hands before they did a surgery. We had a tough time convincing the Catholic Church that maybe the sun actually is the center of this system and that it doesn't rotate around the earth. So those things that which were facts were always presented in a context that it wasn't understood. And that's where a perspective and a patience with others that don't have and share your point of view really, really needs to be out there, because that really, it's just human nature. Well, that's not even human nature. It's just being kind to one another, to where you can allow for those kind of discourses and points of view. Because if we didn't, how would we progress? How would we grow as a society? If you can't talk through your problems, where are you going to end up? You end up in a pit, and you just end up slugging each other till neither of you can really get up and walk out of it. And then what's been accomplished? And, that's kind of got an issue. Yeah, this is another one of those stories. If YouTube existed at the time of Galileo, Susan Wojcicki, I probably butchered that, who is the CEO of YouTube, would only say, on matters of geocentricity versus heliocentricity, we will follow the expert opinion of the Catholic Church, and Galileo would have been banned from YouTube. Right? That's really how clear it is right now, that we've got to deal with. We've got to at least understand that there is another point of view that's out there, and that it can be valid, and then it's just a matter of us being open enough to see it and do it. This is one last one. 2-meter sea level rise. That's what we've been promised, that was going to happen by 2000, 2010, 2050, whenever it's going to happen at some point out in the future. This scientist, Dr. Stefan Ramstoff, says there's nothing we can do to stop this unless we manage to cool the planet. That would require extracting CO2 from the atmosphere. There is no way of doing this on the efficient scale known today. I bet there is. I truly bet there is. I mean, what are the most effective carbon dioxide sequesters? What beings thrive on carbon dioxide? And it's plants. It's plants. If we stop the deforestation, or at least slow it down and begin to reforest, then we'll begin to reverse that CO2 issue, if it is indeed an issue. We still haven't had science that has been, quote unquote, settled, because every time there's a paper issued on the level of CO2 forcing, it differs from every other paper. And then they won't share the formulas, the assumptions that they use to have arrived at that topic, or at that value that we're going to sea levels will rise by 2 meters. There's trees, Robin, trees. It's always been about trees. They're long lasting, minimal effort. And if we could say, leave the forest alone and plant hemp, then we could recycle the hemp very quickly, or even switch grass instead of corn. That's what Brazil does for their ethanol. And they don't have to GMO it. The land is far, far healthier than all the fertilizers and pesticides that have to go on the corn to get that kernel. And with a change in the climate, the switchgrass is going to give us much, much more sugar per ton, or per acre, than what we're able to get out of corn. And in fact, with the cool fall that we had last year, North Dakota ended up abandoning the fields with better than 15% of all of their corn still standing in the field, just left till spring. And personally, I don't know how that ended up. I don't know whether they were able to get it out, harvest it, and then move to go very, very quickly into the next cycle. But they did leave a whole lot of corn standing in the field. So I think there are solutions. And if we can look at other nations and how they are dealing with their biomass, we're tearing down and stripping out lumber simply so we can have biomass for these green gasification plants. There's got to be a better renewable source, better than something that takes 20 plus years to grow back. That's too long a timeline. And my specialty is that we can have limitless energy. We don't need to be looking at green energy, but limitless energy. Those technologies that have been invented, introduced, and then confiscated. And when we can have leadership that is brave enough to stand up to the oil cabal that has dictated military policy, foreign interventions in other, let's just say, natural resource rich countries, then we can let go of that need to be interventionist, and we could then be, let's just say, self-sufficient. And we could, oh my goodness, it's so easy. Just bring these techs out. The inventors are there. We've had gas or water powered automobiles since the mid 70s. A demonstration before Congress was called off the morning that it was to happen. The tech was that good. And what is water? Oxygen, hydrogen. Both are required for fire. You've got to have oxygen to burn, and hydrogen is, well, look at the Hindenburg, look at the sun, is very flammable. And there's a way to separate the two and then bring them back together in the right ratios at the right temperatures that we can send oil to its eventual future. And that is back in the ground. So it's leadership, Robin. That's exactly what we need. I know what'll happen. I know what'll happen. It's not that too far in the future, and I think COVID has given us an opportunity to kind of shake things up. And it's certainly not done yet. It is certainly not done. We will get there, and we'll be able to solve some of these issues with a little bit of time out. How does a teacher want to change the behavior of a recalcitrant student? Well, you put them in timeout and then let them think about the issues that they've had. Some teachers would spank us. I mean, we had those that walked around with the metal rulers and whacked us now and again. But those futures, those alternative limitless power sources are there. And that is not even in the discussion. And that's what's so disturbing to me, is that those ideals, those solutions are there and have been there, but they have been forbidden to speak of. And I'm going to go back to Joe Rogan, that he can begin to show us that there is a fracture inside this monolithic. If one platform deplatforms you, demonetizes you, that the others follow suit very, very quickly, almost within hours. It's happening now. So there is one entity running the puppet strings of these social media giants. And thank you, Joe, for having the guts, the fortitude, and the courage to show us through this. We have a voice, we have discernment, we have a choice where we are all going. We as human beings, and we are human beings and are divine and have the power to change direction. The chaos exists and will always exist, yet it is in the chaos that we can change the way we live and think. For we forget it is our thought that creates this creation from moment to moment. With people, we can change everything. And that's kind of the truth of it. We can see the chaos in it. And in a way, the chaos gives us opportunities, because we can be brave. We can take actions that the controlling structure would not anticipate and necessarily have the means to react to in a rapid way. So we've got an option. We can fix these problems, and we've been prevented from doing so. That to me is the big thing. We've been prevented from fixing it. And so it makes us look like we're selfish, that we're over consumers, that we are wasteful with our resources. But that's the system that has been designed for us, rolled out for us, and protected from us changing. And that's what needs to change. And there's another election coming up. I kind of wonder if either of these two will be in a position to win, that there can't be some third party candidate that can still show up on the scene and in a way like Trump did 4 years ago, throw a wrench into the system and send it spinning and reacting and overreacting, so that in one way or another, whatever disaster has been planned for us or whatever future has been stolen from us can be returned. All right, everybody. Hope you enjoy your weekends. We've all deserved it, and big things are coming to us, both good and bad. But it's our viewpoint, it's our perspective that will determine the lessons that we draw from these experiences and the benefit that we can take from them. All right, everybody, keep looking up. I'm Scott Stevens. Have a great weekend.